Crusader force led by Edward I, Prince of England, was remarkably small, composed of some 250 knights and 600 infantry. Edward had intended to go to the aid of Louis IX in Tunis, but when news of the French king's death reached him, the prince sailed instead for Acre. The situation in the Holy Land was dire. Croix des Chevaliers, one of the most important hospitaller castles in Outremer, fell to the Sultan Baibars and his Mamluks in April 1271. Edward's ships put into Acre in May, just as Baibars was besieging Tripoli, which was filled with thousands of Christian refugees. A French contingent, led by Charles of Naples, arrived to bolster the English army. Edward immediately led the Christian forces in a counterattack, successfully disrupting the Mamluk supply lines. Baibars was forced to withdraw in defeat, and Tripoli was saved. Edward now sent an embassy to the Mongol conqueror of Persia, Abaga, who despised the Mamluks. On September 4th, Edward received a reply from Abaga, stating that he was eager to engage in joint operations against the Muslims. Next, more English troops arrived at Acre, under the command of Edward's younger brother, Edmund, famous for his prowess in battle. Hugh III, king of Cyprus, also showed up with his forces. His army swelled. Edward led a successful raid on the Mamluk-held town of Kakun, while the Mongols devastated the land around Aleppo. However, internal troubles within the Mongol state drew Abaga's attention away from Mamluk territory, and his troops withdrew. Baibars recognized the crucial role Cyprus had played in the defeat of his siege at Tripoli. Therefore, with the goal of destroying the Crusaders' supply lines, the Mamluk Sultan launched a surprise naval invasion of Cyprus, while Edward and the rest of the Christian army was still at Acre. The Mamluk ships attempted a night landing on the port before Limassol, but due to a combination of choppy waters and the crew's unfamiliarity with the port, all the vessels wrecked on the rocks. Some 1,800 Muslim troops were killed or captured by the Cypriots, and the ships plundered. Edward recognized that, considering the fewness of his troops and the enormity of the Mamluk power, further offensive actions were out of the question. He immediately sent a delegation to Baibars to begin negotiating a truce. The Sultan, eager to be rid of Edward and his troublesome crusade, was quite receptive. Edward's goal was to conclude a 10-year truce, settle the political squabbles between the Ibelins and Hugh III of Cyprus, then return to Europe to muster support for a large-scale crusade against the Mamluks. In May 1272, a treaty was struck at Caesarea, which specified the 10-year truce that Edward had wanted. Prince Edmund then departed for England, but Edward decided to stay, to ensure that the treaty held and to continue settling the political situation inside the Crusader states. Within a month, Edward was attacked by an assassin who had managed to enter his bedchamber. The prince received a number of stab wounds, but was able to wrestle the man to the ground and kill him. Edward was confined to bed, recovering from his wounds, with his wife, Eleanor of Castile, attending him. By September, Edward felt confident that he had done all that he could, and departed for England. Considering its limitation in numbers, the Ninth Crusade had at no point been capable of posing a major challenge to the formidable Mamluk Empire. However, the Crusade was not without its achievements, and can be considered a minor success in the history of the numbered Crusades to the Holy Land. Unlike the First Crusade or the Third Crusade, the Ninth Crusade achieved no major conquests, nor did it win any major pitched battles, but it did manage to prevent a Muslim conquest of Tripoli, a city packed with refugees from other Mamluk conquests. And considering the brutality of Baibars' treatment of conquered Christians in the past, that achievement meant everything to the lives of those people within the city. Edward showed himself a capable general, leading a few tactically advantageous raids against the enemy without overextending his lines, and conducting himself effectively in negotiations with Baibars. Ultimately, what the Ninth Crusade bought the Crusader states was 20 additional years before the final crushing Mamluk conquests, which would forever extinguish the Crusader presence in the Levant. Tripoli fell in 1289, rather than in 1271, while Acre would hold out until 1291. There is no conclusive evidence about who it was that sent the assassin to Edward's bedchamber, but it seems at least highly likely that it was Baibars. One theory is that the Mamluk Sultan was nervous about Edward's refusal to go home after finalization of the treaty, and so he decided to have him taken care of. If that's true, it's astounding that Baibars, who wielded such immense power, would feel so threatened by an English prince and his handful of knights. But events showed that Baibars was right to take the Ninth Crusade seriously. That the tiny Ninth Crusade was able to achieve anything at all demonstrates the effectiveness of a crusade under a competent leader, with cooperation from the local Latin Christian forces. Baibars' attempt to conquer Cyprus proves that he had judged the situation of the Crusaders correctly. Cyprus, a legacy of the triumphs of the Third Crusade, was the Franks' most valuable possession, providing an effective and safe base which could supply invasions and operations at almost any point on the mainland coast. That Baibars failed so utterly in conquering the island only reinforced its value, for it was not an easy target of conquest. Indeed, long after mainland Outremer had fallen to the Mamluks, Cyprus would remain a Crusader possession for hundreds of years.